of course.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
Sarah, thank you so much for coming on. It's a pleasure to speak to you and to meet you face to face at long last.
Likewise, I want to say I've been inspired by your podcasts, and I really enjoyed. What I love about your podcast is you talk to all different kinds of people. Everyone behind the scenes that puts all this huge juggernaut that is the rock industry together. And obviously I loved that you did a fantastic and just really interesting interview with Vanessa Warwick, because I don't know if you know much about us, but basically in 1991 she became the presenter of Headbangers Ball. Yeah. And then I left, I was working on The Big Breakfast and The Word, which were two very popular shows, and I was there to book the rock guests and speak to them. And then I literally walked into MTV that first day and met Vanessa, and we were two like-minded women. We weren't groupies. We loved metal. There was no one like us in those days. I'm so pleased that like 30 years later, there's more women working in the industry like Sophie Kay. But for us, it was a really tough ask at the beginning in those early 90s. You know, two women out on their own all over the world stalking rock stars and bringing their stories to, you know, a global platform. And Vanessa was just incredible. Her interviewing technique. My role was always behind the scenes, so booking rock stars. And as you know, that can be very, very tricky. Writing scripts, getting all the research done, sorting out amazing locations, things like if we're going to a festival, where we're going to film it. And then my job was to put the whole show together, edit it, stick in the videos or the live performance. And me and Vanessa had 9 very long, happy years doing Headbangers Ball together.
Well, Sarah, we're going to go back to the very beginning, and then I've got certain things I want to speak to you about, because I think you'll have great insight into it, and you've mentioned a lot of it there, but we'll go into detail about it. But going back to the very beginning, where are you originally from?
So I was born in Brentford and then moved out to Slough, and that was an absolute hellhole. I was the only rock chick. It was just awful. You know, I was with all these people that liked like Casual Soul and all that. And I'd gone up to Carnaby Street, and I was in the Great Frog shop, which is a jewellery shop. And I was only 13, 14 at the time, and I heard Motorhead, the Ace of Spades. They had it on the sound system in the shop. And I just went, oh my God, this is me. This is it.
Was that the first time that was that like you discovering your own musical taste? Because a lot of people I've had on previously, when I asked them, were you into music growing up? Like most people, if their parents were into music, they would be listening to what their parents listened to, and then they get to an age where all of a sudden they discover something that's for themselves. Was that kind of your moment?
Absolutely, Ian. So I grew up, my dad was an absolute classical music freak. So we just grew up to him conducting orchestras while he was cooking. He was a chef. So we grew up listening to madrigals, you know, Handel's Messiah, some really crazy out there, you know, classical music as well. And my mum was a massive pop freak, so she loved her George Michael and the Bee Gees, and the 3 Degrees was her favourite. And although I appreciated it, I knew there was something missing. And then at my school, it was very sort of, you know, traditional, so it was a lot of choir music. And like I said, 13, 14, went up to Carnaby Street to look around the makeup shops, happened to go into the Great Frog, heard Motorhead, the Ace of Spades, and then that was it for me. And then going on from that, when I was 15, I got a job in Woolworths, our local Woolworths in Slough High Street, and I had to look after the the music section, so people coming in to buy LPs. And literally I got in so much trouble. I was playing the new Black Sabbath when it came out. I was discovering bands I hadn't heard of before because of my mum and dad not being into rock or metal. So I was playing Led Zeppelin, Jimi Hendrix. I was going back to all the classics. And I think I pissed off a lot of people working in Woolworths.
It's funny that you say that, because it was even a while ago now for myself, but when I was 17, 18, so you're going way back to the 90s, I also worked in a music shop, and the rule at the time was that you were only allowed to play something that was that was in the top 10 of the pop charts, because they're trying to sell CDs. Back then, you were still selling CDs, and I used to get in trouble because you would sneak on better songs, better CDs, because you had everything within the music shop, but and it's really bad, because actually the 3 albums that were out at the time was Shania Twain's Come On Over. There was like a Step CD, and there was like an ABBA Mania, where all the pop bands of the time had done their cover version of an ABBA song, and that was those three albums on loop for about 7 months. And the many times I got in trouble for popping on some Metallica or whatever. It's almost the same idea that you're talking about. But give me a wee laugh, Sarah. Do you remember what the first album was that you ever bought with your own money?
Oh my God, that's such a good question. I think it was, in fact, I know it was Black Sabbath.
That's nice. And what about your first concert? What was the first professional concert you went to see?
It was Motorhead. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, Hammersmith Odeon.
Yep.
I'll never forget that. It was so loud. I couldn't hear for about 4 days, and we all came out buzzing, got our train back to Slough from Hammersmith. We were like, oh my God. And we were like, this is just amazing. So really old school.
I had a cousin, my younger cousin, he's about 10 years younger than me. He saw Motorhead at the Barrowlands in Glasgow. This was years and years ago. And when you're at a certain age, you just don't care. And then as you become an adult, you just think, I wouldn't do that now. And I always remember he was away down in the pit, jumping about, having a great time. And at one point, he took his T-shirt off and he threw it away. And I don't know if you've ever been in the Barrowlands. It's probably like most venues where there's probably about half an inch of beer and whatever else lying on the floor. At the end of the gig, everyone starts to sort of head towards the exit. He actually found his T-shirt on the ground, and then he just wringed it out and then put it back on again.
Oh, I've got a good tip as well. So if you, especially the Brixton Academy, and we still do it to this day, in the mosh pit, everyone goes crazy. Yep. This is before the time we were contactless. The amount of money we'd find on the floor. Yeah. Once we picked up 300 quid.
Yeah, that's mental.
We were like, well, we're staying on because we can't get back. So, we've got to hang around. So we just pick up money.
But what you're saying here about the mosh pit, because I'm in my 40s. So I started going to gigs in the 90s. Yeah. Before social media, before the internet, before mobile phones and all that nonsense. So it was all just in your head, they're just your memories. And I remember going to gigs, and if you wanted to get to the front barrier, you had to elbow your way to the front and push people out the way and maybe try and crowd surf or whatever. And the last time I went to a big metal concert, it was Machine Head. And I thought, I'm going to go down the front. I hadn't been down the front for a while because I was now at that age where I'm like, I want to stand and watch what I'm paying my hard-earned cash for. I went down the front and everybody's so nice now. Everybody's stand. You're not allowed to touch elbow to elbow with anybody, and everybody's appreciates each other's space. And I'm like, what is this madness? It's like, this is not what I remember the front of a gig being like. It's crazy.
I completely agree with you. In the old days, it was proper mosh. Although, like Machine Heads, who I've worked with many, many times, Rob Flynn is just a great friend of mine. They were one of the first people we filmed, so I'll talk about that later because it was really funny. Yep. But when we were at Wembley with them, they wanted to break the world record of having the number of circle pits, and they got up to 22. They were absolutely stoked. They couldn't believe it. And now there's bands. Alex Terrible, oh my God, now he's like the reigning champion of the Walls of Death and Circle Pits, so it's great to see it. But what I love is, whenever you even Machine Head the other year at the Roundhouse, everyone moshed the shit, they all had blood and sweat and everything, but at the end they all shook hands, went, oh nice, what a lovely evening,
It's funny because see somebody that's never been to a metal show, if you were just to show that to someone, they would probably be confused, like, why are they doing it? I don't understand it. But when you're actually in it, everybody looks out for each other. If somebody falls down, they make sure that you get up and nobody gets hurt. And you know, it's a weird thing if you're not into it and you've never been to it or experienced it. It just looks like madness.
I know, but I suggest every young kid, a lot of the kids I know these days that I see at gigs, I say just do it once in your life, and you'll experience what we've all experienced. It's just what an absolute rush you get from that mosh pit. Yeah.
So Sarah, I've obviously looked through, I went on to LinkedIn and I had a peek at your job history, which is very impressive. But there's certain parts of it I really want to speak about now. I know that you put down the first kind of thing on it is from August 1990 when you became a researcher for the Big Breakfast.
That's right.
TV. So for anybody that's not old enough to remember that, it was absolutely massive. It was a morning TV show. You had guests on, you had music. It was very fun. But I don't even think you get anything like that nowadays because it was something to watch. It was absolutely massive. I don't know what the numbers would have been.
It was absolutely huge. So I was brought on to do the pilot in 1989 and Channel 4 looked at it and it was just carnage. It was live, which makes it really difficult. And we all say if you've worked in live television, it's like a dog life. You've done 4 years in normal television is 1 year in live because every morning you're up at 3 a.m, filming all the way through. Chris Evans was a genius, but you never knew where he was going to go. And it always went off onto tangents. And my favourite job, I used to open all the fan mail. That was my first job there. And some of the letters we'd get in, and it inspired us for most of our segments on there.
Well, I was going to ask you, Sarah, was that your first job in the sort of TV world?
Yes, yeah.
So how did you get your foot in the door? How did you get that job?
Well, my dream growing up in that horrible Slough council estate was to come back to London and escape. So I managed to get into film school. I had to write a big thing about why I wanted to be at film school, and I was obsessed with Alfred Hitchcock at the time and the music from the Omen film, which, as you know, has got slightly a metal vibe to it as well as being classical. Yep. So, excuse me. So I wrote this thesis up about why I wanted to be there, and then someone dropped out. So they said, right, you've got it. And in those days, which is really sad for students these days, you got a grant. So it meant I could move back to London, go to film school, qualified and did really well, thank God. Had to make some really crappy films. But for me, a lot of the stuff I made was all about what soundtracks I put on the back. So that's why I did, luckily, really well. I think it was my music of knowledge and then putting that sort of metal, high-energy vibe on it. So then basically something came out and it was saying new TV show needs people to work on it. That was Planet 24, which was Bob Geldof's company. Wrote in with a CV and luckily they said, right, come on board. We've got a job for you. You're just opening fan mail. And basically from that, I obviously made loads of tea and coffee for 2 years. I was the number one best tea maker in Planet 24's history. Yorkshire tea bags all the way. So got on really well there. And then out of some of the fan mail, I started saying, why don't we do this as an idea? Why don't we do this? And then that really, really built and built. And then I got to work with Zig and Zag, you know, the puppets. And they were, even though I'm terrified of puppets, I may add, I was absolutely terrified. But then Kieran and Mick, who did it, they were rock dudes. So we started getting in bands like Aerosmith, all sorts. And it was just so much fun. And then I sort of built my way up. And then Paul Ross, who's Jonathan Ross's brother, he was working on The Big Breakfast with me, and he'd got the job working on The Word. And we often talked about rock music while I was making his cup of tea. Anyway, he brought me on to The Word, and then I was blessed that they listened to my madness, and I managed to get Faith No More, Sepultura, L7, the famous Where She Dropped Her Trousers. That was a nightmare. But by then I'd really got into rap as well. So I said, look, you've got to get Snoop Dogg on, Cypress Hill. And obviously my biggest coup, and the biggest thing I remember is getting Nirvana on the show, which to this day was still incredible.
I suppose it was that thing that from the people above you that were listening to you, they were getting a young person's perspective on things at the time. This is coming up. This is what people are going to want to see.
And also, because the word was anarchaic, and it wanted that shock factor. The more shocking bands I could get, it was better for them, because it was all about shock value and attracting people in, and people going, "Oh my God, this is unbelievable." So, although I disagreed with it, when we booked Sepultura, the fans had to have meat thrown at them, like big raw steaks and all that. And then with L7, I knew they were going to do something outrageous, and her showing her fanny on live TV. And if you actually watch the YouTube clip, I've got a clipboard and I'm trying to cover up like her lady parts, and everyone's cracking up.
Yeah.
And then Nirvana obviously absolutely destroyed the studio. Faith No More, I knew would be mad, because I love that band, and I knew they'd be as mad as a box of frogs, which they were. And I think the bands we booked stood out for all the right reasons, not the wrong reasons. So although they'd encouraged the shock factor, people couldn't believe how genuinely brilliant these bands were.
Well, there's another thing as well. Rock and metal, it's overlooked an awful lot for people that don't like it. But there's a reason why 30 years later these bands are still as big, if not bigger. There's a reason for that. And bottom line is, the music stands itself. Everything else, is a byproduct. But the music itself stands the test of time.
I completely agree. I mean, who'd have thought all those bands I booked 30, 40 years ago are still going strong, and it just makes me so proud.
I don't think those bands would have even thought it back then.
Oh, they can't believe they're alive. Ozzy says he's part cyborg. He just doesn't know how he's still going, going strong and doing all these podcasts and stuff. So
who was the first, do you remember, who was the sort of first big band, famous band, if you want to call it that you met?
Obviously Nirvana, because we booked them. I think, it'd be Nirvana for that shoot. And
is that for back then? Is that the standout band just for your own personal self?
No. For my personal self, it was number one, Machine Head. So we went out and filmed them. So it was my first job at Headbangers Ball, and we'd never heard of them. They were recording a debut album, and Joey Houston, their manager, who's still a really great friend of mine, said, "You need to come out and see this band." And Roadrunner Records, who were just up the road in Ealing, said, "You need to go and check this band out." So Vanessa and I flew out to Oakland, California. We were in the absolute ghetto. Everyone had guns. We went out for a Mexican. It was a crazy time. Anyway, they took us into this tiny broadcast, tiny little studio, and played us Burn My Eyes. And me and Vanessa just said, "This is going to change the face of metal. It's unbelievable." And then we went out and shot pool with them, and just had some crazy, crazy nights.
I always say with Machine Head, the biggest problem Machine Head ever had was that, in my opinion, their first album was a masterpiece. They could never, ever top that first album, in my opinion. It was so good.
Yeah, it took a while, but then The Blackening for me was their next big, absolute. When we heard it, again, it was one of those, it just blew our minds, and we were so glad. And that was written about Dimebag Darrell. It was Rob's rage. It was much more from the heart. I think sometimes with bands, when they get bigger, they kind of get either told by their record label, or they think themselves, we've got to change, we've got to change direction, make it slightly more commercial. Yeah. So that's why I really appreciate the bands that are still with us today that never changed their ID. And, Machine Head know that now. They should have just stuck to what they did.
It's true what you say. I've heard a lot of interviews, and I think it was one I was watching with James Hetfield from Metallica.
Yeah.
And you hear the same thing all the time. The first 4 or 5 albums are classics, and then some people don't like the ones after. personally like all of them, but you know, people would say to them, like Master of Puppets album, it's always voted the best thrash album, metal album of all time. And they'll ask him, you know, what was your mindset at the time? And his mindset was, let's record the next album. These are the next 8 songs we've wrote. Now he would say it was maybe the right time, the right place, it was the right songs, the right attitude for the band members and all that sort of thing. But he was saying because they were young, they weren't overthinking. So it was basically, this is the next 8 songs, let's record them so we can get back out on tour. Whereas now he says, we can overthink everything. That's why it takes twice as long to record an album, because we'll write 18 songs and then we'll need to cut it down to 12. And he says, we can pretty much make anything passable. He says, back then, you didn't overthink anything, partly because you were young and you just wanted to kind of get out there on tour. But Machine Head, I liked, you know, they've especially, there's albums that are different sounding, but I liked all the stuff that they were bringing out. Through the Ashes of Empires was a great album as well. I loved The More Things Change. I mean, you know, but their first album for me was just perfection. There's no fillers on that. That's a album's perfection.
Absolutely. I still listen to it to this day. And if, you know, Let Freedom Ring with a Shotgun Blast, if I hear that, everyone's straight on onto the dance floor. But I think that also, because I interviewed so many bands over the years, from your huge bands like Kiss, Def Leppard, Aerosmith, Jimmy Page. There's so much pressure put on the labels. So that first album is so brilliant because it's organic, it's your thoughts, it's your rage, and sometimes it's a perfect storm of the right people coming together at the right time. But then from then on, you're controlled, especially in America. You know, you've got delivery dates, you've got to be in the studio, you've got this, that. And then you've got all the extra pressure from the people around you, because then you start getting yeses to everything. Then they really build you up. Then you realise how much money you owe record labels, so you have to try and make the money back. Then in the 90s especially, everyone was making really expensive videos. And people don't know that these bands had to pay that money back. It wasn't paid by the record label. They got a massive, big-ass bill at the end of, you know, the album season.
Suppose when you think about it, when a band first starts out, it's 4 or 5 band members. All they're thinking about is, let's make the best songs we can possibly make.
Yeah.
At some point down the line, I don't even know, I don't think it's avoidable, but there's going to be someone in their ears who the number one thought's money.
Yeah.
And I mean, I understand it. It becomes a business, especially if you become a successful band. But going back, so you obviously, the Big Breakfast was your sort of starting point. There was the Word. How did you were the producer of MTV's Headbangers Ball? So
yes.
How did that job come about for you? And what was the initial idea of the show that was presented to yourself?
So Vanessa had already come up with the idea, and then my deputy editor at The Word, we just got on so well. She couldn't believe these bands like Nirvana we'd booked, and Faith No More, Stone Temple Pilots. Anyway, she'd got a job high up at MTV, and she phoned me and said, "Oh, Sarah, I really want you to come on board. There's this amazing rock chick called Vanessa." And I think, don't quote me on this, but I think she started as a PA there, Vanessa, and she was a model, because obviously she's beautiful, and she was a metalhead. And I think it came about, Vanessa chatted to Brent, our CEO, and then they did a pilot, which did really well. And then at the time, the rock music scene was absolutely exploding. So Tamsin had said, "I know this great rock chick who works behind the scenes," put us together, and it was like love at first sight. I just loved her. She loved what I was coming from, because I'm more of I don't like being in front of the camera, and I respect any presenter out there, people like yourself. It's a really difficult job to do. So I was happy to just write my words, book the bands, set it all up and edit it. And as you know, it became an absolute huge global sensation. And to this day, we've still got websites dedicated to us. We've got people who recorded every single show on VHS. And also we had some bloody great adventures.
Yeah, I mean, I even noticed there's a Facebook group that's been set up. I don't think it's been running that long, and it's all about Headbangers Ball, but it's for the European one.
Yes.
Vanessa and yourself, and I think that's exactly what they're doing. They're tracking down people that have old VHS recordings of the show, trying to get them digitised and sort of bringing it back so that they've got it. I don't know if they're going to put it on YouTube or what they're going to do with it, but I think it's European Headbangers Ball on Facebook. So for anybody that's watching, they can check that out. But I mean, Headbangers Ball was a massive show, and it was obvious, as I said to Vanessa when I spoke with her, it was before the internet, it was before YouTube and all that. So, you know, TV was the place that you would go, and there wasn't a lot of these shows around. So for a fan like myself, it was great to watch, and I loved Vanessa's presenting style because, and you mentioned this before, she wasn't some silly groupie that was just chasing after the band. She was on the same level as the band, but she was sitting down and asking the band questions that, as a fan, I would like to have sat and asked them. Now, when you see a lot of bands getting interviewed, they're in a nice television studio, and it's the same boring 4 or 5 questions. I liked about Vanessa, I loved the concept of her going backstage at a festival, for example, sitting down on the grass, if it was a nice day, that is, and sitting with the band and actually talking to the band one-on-one. And okay, you're going to ask them the questions that you know, what's the new album all about, what he's doing, blah, blah, blah. But she would ask them questions, and she would also speak to the band. It wouldn't be the front person, it would be the whole band. You get to remember that maybe you didn't normally hear from. So it was a really refreshing approach. And it's quite sad because you still, even to this day, you don't see that too much. Albeit it's changed a lot now because TV is almost went to second place because you've now got streaming and you've got online as well. But yeah, Headbangers Ball, it was so good. But my question for you, why was it cancelled if it was such a popular show?
Oh, I can tell you that story. Oh my God. Oh, it was just ridiculous. So at the end of 1999, it was when Ibiza and dance had all come in, and they'd commissioned shows about Ibiza and dance. Then basically they said, basically all the media was rock music is dead. You know, we couldn't get Iron Maiden on Radio 1. There was this huge backlash against rock. You know, we'd gone through, you know, hair metal, heavy metal, new wave of British heavy metal, punk, pop, that sort of stuff, grunge. And then basically to MTV it had died a bit of a death. So one day we were there, and the next day, here's a check, thanks for everything you've done, bye-bye. And it really affected us both. It was such a shock because we'd put in our absolute love, heart. We bled for that. We had to go into, you know, mosh pit war zones. We even had to have a cameraman who was from a war background so that he could film Sepultura, you know, because of the kids. So we were absolutely devastated. It was just a trend. And then following on from that, I went and had a meeting at Channel 4 about perhaps launching a new rock show. At the time, they had every other genre covered, all indie, soul, reggae, Ibiza, dance, drum and bass. And I said, how about a rock show? You know, I suggested Slash as a presenter. He was well up for it, with Def Leppard doing side bits. And you know what the woman said, who controls the whole of Channel 4 Music? She just turned to me and said, I fucking hate rock music. And that was the end of the meeting. So even though I'd proven the demograph of how much rock music is consumed, the magazines, everything, it's up to one individual person at all these stations to decide what sort of music they're going to put on their TV.
It's crazy. I spoke with, at the start of quite a few seasons ago, a few episodes ago, I spoke with Tom Russell from Rock Radio. And he was saying that back in the 70s, he owned record stores in Glasgow, and back then, when a new artist was advertising their album, promoting it, they would do tours of cities, and a lot of the press, along with record store owners, would get invited along because that's how they would get their album sold. And it was through that he became friends with, I can't remember his name, it was one of the high up people in the radio station. And every time we spoke to him, he was asking him about rock music, and he said to him, "Oh, I'm not interested, I don't like rock music, I think it's just a passing phase." I think was what he said. But at the same time, he listened to him, and Tom says that he called him a couple of weeks later and he says, "Tom, I don't like rock music, it's not my thing, I don't think it's going to last, but you're younger than me, you know what the kids are listening to just now, I'm willing to give you a chance. Do you fancy coming down for 6 weeks training, and I'll give you a 2-hour slot on a Friday night and you can play any rock music that you want?" He says he went down for 6 weeks, and that was him there for 30 years playing rock music. That just would not happen nowadays. It's so sad that somebody who didn't understand was still willing to give someone a chance. You know, okay, he didn't like rock music, but there's plenty of people out there. I mean, that's probably quite a savvy businessman, because he's listening to other people. He might not get it, but, you know, there's maybe other people that do get it, and he can make some money from it. But, I mean, it just shows you, I mean, rock music will still be here in 100 years' time. It's not going anywhere. It's constantly here. And, I mean, you go to any gig or festival, they're sold out.
Yep. Yeah, I absolutely agree. I went in with all these facts to a few different TV stations, just showing how huge the rock industry is, how much money there is in the music industry. You know, Iron Maiden make £1.5 million a night from merchandise, from T-shirts alone.
Yeah.
You know, on top of everything else. And I know things have changed with streaming. So in the old days when I worked with bands, they'd only come over to promote their album because that's what made them the money. Nowadays, it isn't like that. You know, they've all got their side hustles, and a lot of the time that's what they're promoting. So we don't have to ask as many questions about the second or third album these days, because they've got other things to promote and talk about, which I quite like in a way. But I do, in a way, feel sorry for bands, because they have to tour for 9 months now to make some money back, recoup their money. Whereas in the old days, it'd only be a couple of months because the album would do so well. Yeah. So I think, you know, bands have got it a bit tough at the moment. But then I feel really positive about the future, because every gig I go to, there's so many young kids there. You know, when I was at Slipknot, you got mini maggots going all the way up to, you know, maggots in wheelchairs. And, you know.
Here's a question for you. I'll get your opinion on this. And it's an interesting one, right? So you've been in the music business for 30 years, 30 plus, right?
Thank God for Botox.
However, you've been a fan for even longer, right? Yes. So just a fan of the music, right? When you think about the big bands, the ones that have been going a long time, let's say like Metallica, Iron Maiden, Guns N' Roses, I suppose, Slipknot, Kiss, I know Aerosmith, they've just finished, but those are some of the big bands. Now, in 15, 20 years' time, sadly, they'll all be gone. They'll probably have retired. Yeah. As much as it breaks my heart to say that. But those bands alone, they can pull in 60,000 plus fans easily. Oh, yeah. To headline a festival, right? Now, there's millions or thousands of great bands out there. Bands like Machine Head, who can tour the world. You know, they've got a successful career. They can sell out 3,000, 5,000 seaters every single night of a tour. But they can't pull in 60,000 plus. What happens once all those big bands are gone? What's going to happen to the festivals?
Well, do you know what? That's my big worry. And in a way, I'm really grateful for the era that we've had. You know, we've had the era of the super bands and the stadium bands. And for me, that is a massive concern. So I'm going out and seeing all those bands while we still have the privilege. Yeah. You know, like Iron Maiden, they're huge, to AC/DC, because like you said. And I don't know whether we were so lucky that we had the most amazing bands on the planet for our sort of last 30 plus years and counting, I'm not sure how many of the new bands coming through will do as well. I mean, it does worry me.
I mean, I'm saying Machine Head. Machine Head are not a new band. I mean, they've already been on the go for 30 years. But why are bands, I mean, they're successful, but why are they not as big as the bands of yesterday?
Well, you know, Machine Head actually still play car parks in America. When we went to Oslo,
Really?
yeah, they were headlining the car park, whereas Slipknot, Disturbed, who else was on that gig list? Korn, they were all on the, on the main stage. So I think some bands that are quite niche, or they've got their set fanhood, and then you've got other bands that are very broad.
It's weird that you say that, though, because I think I did hear that in an interview. Machine Head, they might have a different audience in Europe to America.
Yeah, they have, totally different.
But as in, they come to the UK, they're selling out every 5,000 seater, 3,000 seater.
Yeah, but in America, there's 51 states to go to, and it's a whole different kettle of fish. It's very hard. We're really small in the UK, and the word gets out much quicker. We're a really small island. Whereas to break America is so hard. I've worked with all these bands, that worked and worked. I worked with Korn, Pantera, and they had to tour the arse out of America, these little shitty places, to get their name around. And nowadays you can just go on the internet, and if you've got a great song, you've got a great song.
Yeah, it's a different style as well. I know someone they've lived out in San Diego for the last years, 25 years. And it's funny, last time I was out there was maybe 2005.
Yeah.
And you think about Iron Maiden, I mean, arguably them and Metallica are the two biggest rock metal bands. But 2005, Bruce Dickinson came back at 2000, 99, 2000. They released Brave New World. They then released Dance of Death. I mean, those two albums were absolutely enormous. And I can remember going out on holiday, and he wasn't even aware that Iron Maiden were still on the go. He thought they were like a relic from the 80s. But he's listening to bands like Deftones, which, okay, they've got a fan base here, but they were never as big here as they were across in America. So it just maybe depends on where you are in the world, what's popular and what's not. But it's just a shame because there's so many really great bands out there, but it's just a worry as in they're successful and they're great to go and see a gig, but who's going to headline these gigs, like the big act, unless they maybe dumb it down a wee bit and it's maybe a bit more rock, like your Foo Fighters or Green Day that are bringing in bigger crowds, but it then doesn't really become a metal festival. That's the thing.
No, I mean, to me, when you go and see bands, they're not my favourites, but they absolutely sell out whenever I'm in LA. So you go and see bands like Sleep Token, for example. They're the next big thing, definitely. They're selling out huge stadia in America and over here. Obviously, they've sold out the O2. Yeah. And Ghost, I think they'll still be going strong in 20 years. So there will be other bands that are sort of evolving through and coming up. Skindred, I can see Benji from Skindred doing the Newport Helicopter when he's 70, So I do think that there will be Nova Twins. So there are these bands that will take over, but I still agree with you that I don't think they're the next big stadia band.
I think as well, and I've spoke with a lot of musicians about this.
Yeah.
And it's just people might disagree, but the other thing as well, though, is that you look back to the 60s, right? You had all these, especially towards the late 60s, you had all these great bands. You had The Who, The Doors, The Beatles, The Rolling Stones, like the list goes on, absolutely amazing. Definitely their own unique sound. You then go into the 70s and you've got, it continues on. You've got obviously disco, you've got punk, but again, it's new sounds that had never been heard before. Go into the 80s, and you've got thrash being born when it comes to like the rock side of things. even in the 90s, you've got grunge, which was refreshing. New metal hadn't been done before. Part of me always sort of thinks by the time you got to 2000, everything had been done. And although you got, in the last 24 years, you've had amazing bands coming out, I've not heard a sound that I go, I've never heard that before. I listen to it and I go, that sounds like a combination of Metallica and Iron Maiden. Like, it's been done before.
Yeah.
I kind of think, I don't know if there's something in that it just naturally gets to a point where you're not creating a new genre.
I mean,
all been done.
Yeah, I agree. But how can you? I just don't see there'll be another, with the evolution of media, television and journalism, I just think that we've gone through everything. And some bands are taking the best of bits and putting them together. And also for me as a TV producer, it's really sad that Kerrang TV is no longer, Scuzz is no longer. And these channels had huge ratings. But because of the internet, everything's, being watched there. And I get that. The kids just want to watch stuff in, 90-second bites. So, how can, in my dream, it would be that someone creates this new amazing genre. But I can't see what else we can do because, we've gone into every music genre there is and done a massive mashup. But my hopes and dreams in the future is obviously I've got the TV show with Vanessa Warwick, and that's a nostalgia-based show. And if you look at anything on television, a lot of it's nostalgia. So we're, next week we're doing Jerry Cantrell from Alice in Chains, my absolute all-time favourite guitarist and songwriter. Love him. Got so many embarrassing stories about him. So for me, we're maintaining the longevity and we're celebrating these bands while we've got them. So with Heavy Metal Heydays and then In Rock We Trust, which is a new series that I'm really excited about, which your good self is involved in. With that, we're going to celebrate the legacy, but also introduce new bands. Mm-hmm. With my Metal Talk stuff, we've got a brilliant show that I've created for Monty called Monty's Meet and Greet. And it's about having the ultimate meet and greet experience. So what the fans want to know, we're going to do Q&As in front of, with rock bands in front of fans, all genres, all ages. So I'm really excited about that. But all of this will be sort of YouTube-led or that sort of platform, hopefully with some sponsorship. And then our next big thing, which I know you'd be interested in, it's called Breaking Bands. And it's the search to find those next nuggets of metal and rock gold. So we'll be supporting all the young kids that are really struggling. There's no record labels anymore. So it's all about getting the word out for these bands.
If you're wanting to support any old kids, I'll send you my band's CD over.
We're always up for that.
But that's fine. Quickly, just looking back across the word MTV Headbangers Ball, Kerrang TV.
Yeah. What's
some of your, when you think back on that, first of all, does it feel like yesterday? Does it feel like a long time ago?
Do you know what I say? I think being a rock star keeps you younger than ever because, I hadn't seen Korn for 30 years and then the other week we bumped into each other. They literally played Guns With Heart, my back garden here in Brentford. They looked exactly the same. So whatever it is, keep drinking the Jesus water. Same with Def Leppard. They just never change. So, right.
When you think back on that part of your career, what's some of the 2 or 3 of the automatic memories that pop into your mind? What's some of the best memories for you?
Oh my God, that's like asking me to choose my favourite kitten. I think, number one, Machine Head, that first album, hearing something and knowing it was going to change the world of metal as we saw it. Number 2, Alice in Chains. When Lane stayed, sadly with Lane, but they came over and played, it was then known as the Town and Country. And that band changed my life. Like literally, I've been everywhere to stalk them. I've been to deep down darkest Oklahoma to see Boggy Depot, as Jerry Cantrell calls it. Another hilarious one was being in LA with Def Leppard, and we were in this little minibus and we got lost, and I was like, I'm sitting here in LA with Def Leppard and we're in this manky minibus, like lost, and just cracking up laughing. one of my most outrageous nights out was with Ian Astbury from The Cult.
Right, okay.
Which involved a car crash, ending up in some weird Hollywood producer's mansion, and then doing a group hug over John Lennon's Star.
Right.
Another brilliant one was when we did the Classic Rock Awards in LA, and we were with Sharon and Ozzy and everyone, and Eric Idle from Monty Python was there, and he came up to me because he heard my British accent. He went, "Ian, love, where do I go to get a cigarette and a fucking red wine?" Talking of red wine, when Ozzy Osbourne thought red wine was a soft drink, he was like, "Sarah, I've been drinking that for 20 years. I thought it was a soft drink." And we used to go out and film at Ozzy's mansion all the time, just up the road in Amersham. And we'd gone out. One day he couldn't make it out to the mansion, so he stays in the Dorchester. This was for Kerrang TV. We did a Kerrang meet.
Yep.
And so we ordered a throne. We put up loads of crucifixes, got all this like purple curtains in. He walked in and he went, "Fuck me, Sarah, have you burgled me?" It looked like he just couldn't believe it. Steve Tyler from Aerosmith, I said, "So Steve, this is an interview for Kerrang TV." He went, "Kerrang! That's what I think about when I'm..." And he never finished the fucking sentence. So I've always wanted to know in his head what Kerrang meant to him. I was like, I really need to know that. So Steve, if you're watching this, I really need to know. And then another hilarious one was Gene Simmons from Kiss. Oh God, I've got so many stories. So I walked in to do an interview and my hair's really messy naturally.
Same.
Yeah. He went, "Hey, Sarah, you've got that JBF hair going on." I was like, "Oh, wow, thanks, Gene." Yeah. And he went, "Yeah, just being fucked." I just went, "Oh, my God." But in those days, like, people still ask me about sexism in the rock industry. I loved it. I loved getting groped by Steve Tyler. I loved having my bottom pinched by Gene Simmons. I loved all that stuff because in those days it was just a really good laugh. I loved that Metallica measured your tits to see if you could go backstage and all of that stuff. And then finally, I think the most terrifying moment I've ever encountered was, number one, being cursed by a death metal band, Vanessa and I, and everything came true. We got really ill, nearly got murdered, got trapped in a hotel, you name it. I can't mention them because they're still around, but that was absolutely terrifying. And then my most terrifying moment was I was in America on my own with a little shitty camera for Scuzz TV.
Yep.
And I was interviewing Slipknot. And it was the first time I'd ever met them in person. And I was sitting there with my little camera, 9 masked maniacs walking up to me. Some are 8 foot tall, Joey Jordison, all in their masks. I shat myself, literally shat myself. And then they were as soft as a basket of baby puppies. So this goes to show. And then that night we were doing Bon Jovi karaoke in their tour bus. So it just goes to show. So...
you should write a book. There's so many stories.
I could, but I'd be sued. I really would.
Also, I know that you'd mentioned this before, so I don't know if you do it yourself or if it was advice, but how does someone get into, see someone that's interested in reviewing gigs, reviewing albums, things like that? Is that something that you also do at the moment?
Oh, I do loads of it for Metal Talk, loads.
So how do you get into that? And if someone listening fancies maybe going down that route, what advice would you give to them?
Oh, I've got loads of great advice. I mentor a lot of the younger fans coming into the industry now that want to do it, photographers, reviewers, wannabe rock journalists, and I'm absolutely honoured when anyone gets in touch with me and asks how to do it. Number one, be really nosy, because I'm really nosy. So ask the questions that the fans want to know, not what you think people want to know. Mm-hmm. Be aspirational, because the rock industry has a hard enough time, and I get so sick of the rock dinosaur reviewers and interviewers who are down on our community and our bands. They try and put bands against each other. They think it's really cool to pull questions out of a teddy bear stomach. It's not cool. Our kids are really intelligent. So that's the number one rule. Never ask, do you get nervous before a gig? If I ever hear someone say that again, they'll be murdered. I'll just kill them. So basically, look up your favourite outlets on social media, what magazines, whatever. Reach out to people like Metal Talk or any of the Rock Candy, any of the great sites, and start doing it as to build up your portfolio, and then keep going with that, and then eventually you'll get noticed and approached by other people. If there's certain bands you're a really big fan of, always ask to do their reviews, because they'll start remembering you. And this is the same with photographers. Try and get to all the gigs that, you know, the bands you like, and then you'll build up a rapport with them, their tour manager. Once you've written something up, share the shit out of it. Make sure their PR people know about it, or their labels. And basically just keep stalking and building it up and building it up. And then, like I said, once you've got a really nice collection of articles, send them off to all the people you want to work for. Television-wise, there's loads of internships. So you can write into MTV, ITV, E4. If you've got a great idea for a show, just find out who you like, write to the commissioning editor, suggest ideas, and do it that way.
Yeah, I mean, it's actually, I know what you're saying about those particular jobs, but just jobs in general. Create your own luck, because nobody's going to come and chap your door and offer you your dream job.
You have to. I come up with these. I literally wake up at 3 a.m. going, oh my God, that'd be a good idea for a TV show. Oh my God, that'd be a good idea for an article on social media. The same with my beloved football team, Brentford. I'm always dreaming. What's the next big thing? So I think dream, write, and stalk. Yeah.
See all the jobs that you've done.
Yeah.
There's many, you know, great jobs that. Have you ever had to deal with imposter syndrome?
No.
No. Self-confidence.
No, I treat everyone as they should treat me. I've had incidents where I've promoted a band and got them to number 1 in the UK charts for them to slag me off and call me names when they saw me next. And I felt disappointed, but I call it third album syndrome. So they go up their own arses, forget who helped them up there, and then eventually, they'll slip again, and then they need you again. But I'm genuinely lucky because a lot of the people I work with now have been lifelong friends. Alice in Chains, Machine Head, Faith No More, Slipknot. They trust me, I trust them, and Def Leppard, Kiss, and they'll literally say, come along to this gig, you know. So I think it's about building a rapport. But I've never felt that because I think I'm a really strong bird. I had to work in the metal industry. Can you imagine?
Yeah.
When I was like 22 years old from a Slough council estate, and I've never felt imposter syndrome, but that doesn't mean to say I don't still get sick to my stomach if I have to do the interview, because a lot of the time we don't have presenters. We have to cut our voices out because a lot of the TV shows get translated. So if you've got a TV presenter on top of a band talking, it's a lot of work for the subtitlers. So I'll do the question and they put my question in their answer.
Right.
And then we cut me out and then use the music to filter it out. So I think it's good to have nerves, but don't feel like you've got imposter syndrome, because at the end of the day, we all, go to the toilet. We all have cats.
Yeah. If you've not got nerves, I think there's something wrong. But it's how you handle them.
Oh, I get sick to my stomach. Even now, after 30 years of doing Jerry Cantrell, next week before the interview, I'll be in butterflies. I'll be having like a dodgy Pret a Mankey coffee. I'll be shaking. And that's why I'm so glad to have Vanessa Warwick back on the screens where we belong. Because I send her the questions, she makes it look so easy, and it's not. So, yeah, I'm blessed to have her and blessed that I've had so many amazing presenters, but I'm really glad that my words have been heard behind the scenes and that my beautiful pictures and my beautiful edits. I suggest one thing everyone watches, talking and bringing this back to mosh pits, is one of the highlights of my life was producing Sonosphere Festival. And we filmed Machine Head doing Halo. And it's on YouTube, so everyone watch this. Bear with it. So there's a girl in a bikini, tiny, teeny little girl, on her own. Watch what happens next. It's one of the best things in television, and that deserves an absolute medal.
That's fine. So, Sarah, we've obviously been lots of in-depth chat about music, about your career, about what you've got going on in the future as well. So what I'd like to do is end things with some fun questions for yourself. Okay?
Oh!
So, here we go. Imagine you've got a time machine. Imagine you can go back in time, anywhere in the world, big gig, small gig. What's the one gig that you wish you could have attended?
Jimi Hendrix, Isle of Wight. I just love what he inspires people to do, playing left-handed, turning his guitar upside down. Yeah. A lot of people I speak to, to this day, guitarists are still inspired by what Hendrix did, and he had to break down social barriers, racial barriers. He was a bit like me, a bit of an outsider that had to try and break into, a very misogynistic rock world. With him, it was different vibes, but yeah, Hendrix all the way.
There's millions of great songs that have been written and recorded across the years. What's the one song that you wish you could have sat in the studio to witness the band actually recording it?
Absolutely, without a doubt, Alice in Chains, Down in a Hole.
Yeah, that would have been cool. Yeah. So, the job that you're doing, as the saying goes, if you find a job that you love, you'll never work a day in your life. I know that you work hard, but you look like you're having a great time at doing it. So what other hobbies do you have that are away from music?
So I got really ill a few years ago where I was working with Sir Lenny Henry on a brilliant documentary about black rock music stars, and we were having a really good time. And I was diagnosed with almost, stage 3 breast cancer. And literally that week I had to go into chemo and couldn't work for 4 years. And through that time, I wrote a book, which I'm so proud of, called My Brilliant Boobs. And it's now a bestseller, excuse the pun. So I'm busy promoting that. My next big book is called The Groupie's Guide to the World of Rock. And it's how to blag a backstage pass, how to get into all the cool rockstar parties where the rock stars hang out, how to get an upgrade on a plane, how to stalk, and how to get a good selfie. So I'm really excited about that. So doing a lot more writing. I'm a massive Brentford FC fan, so I'm at every home game. And then the big thing is my charities. So the Brentford Penguins, which is the first ever Down syndrome team for football. And basically people watching. That's my number one big hobby.
That's fine. What's, off the top of your head, what's some of your favourite movies?
Oh, good question. Number one, absolutely Point Break. Find the ghost within the ghost, Keanu, Patrick Swayze, you can't go wrong. Final Tap, obviously. Flight 666 was brilliant. So I was out with the Sky Arts Commissioners and they'd come up to watch downloads and they didn't know anything about rock music. And it was Guns N' Roses were headlining, actually. Anyway, I played them the movie on the train and I was so blessed. They thought it was unbelievable. Put it on Sky Arts literally a couple of weeks later. So definitely that. Any music documentaries, the decline of the Western civilization. And also I love a good concept album. And my one go-to, which I still do to this day, is Operation Mindcrime by Queensryche. Watching that whole album from start to finish, but the DVD, so you've got all the visuals.
Cool. You've got a dinner party to go to. Who's your 4 dream dinner party guests?
Oh, God, I love you. Your questions are brilliant, Ian. You should be in my spot, definitely. So 4 dinner guests, past or present. Okay. Yeah. Number 1, Mike Patton. A, because he's really good looking. Oh, I've always fancied him. He was my poster on my wall, and I couldn't believe it when I met him. I couldn't talk. I was just like. So definitely Mike Patton. For a really good laugh, it'd have to be Jaw from Def Leppard. Jaw, because he's really funny and he just proper cracks me up. It'd be, oh my God, it's between, sadly, Joey Jordison or I'll go Corey Taylor, because I spent about 5 years on the road with Slipknot, and literally every night we'd be crying with laughter. And he's really goofy. Like, you think he's all serious and that, but every night he'd have a dinner medal or coffee down his top, and he can sing anything. Like, his Bon Jovi is better than Bon Jovi. That's 3. And obviously Sharon Osbourne, because she did so much for me and Vanessa back in the day. She supported us because she knew we weren't groupies. She knew we loved our music. We'd have such a laugh, like her throwing the ham at her neighbours. That's her every day. So, Sharon Osbourne. And then Benji from Skindred, because I just love that man.
Sharon seems really cool because, I mean, obviously she's known as being Ozzy's wife, Ozzy's manager. I don't think people realise how good a businesswoman she is.
Oh, hello, look at her dad. I mean, you just have to read her autobiography and read about Tom Hudden. That woman was amazing. She turned Ozzy's career around, and also the careers of a lot of other bands. She
also, two things that come to mind when I ask her, I mean, she's a great businesswoman, but she cares. She seems to care about the music. It's not turned into a business about money. She still cares about the actual music.
Oh, she does. That's why Ozfest became the huge success it was, whereas other festivals failed. She knew which bands to pick, which bands were on the rise. If Ozzy wasn't well enough to do it, she'd pick equally brilliant headliners to entertain us. The woman's absolutely amazing, and people...
She doesn't take any shit.
Oh, hell no. Oh, my God, you do not want to get on the wrong side of her, but my God, we've had some tears of laughter. Like, you know, putting Ozzy's dwarf in the overhead locker on the first class trip to America, just one thing after another. That woman, she's got, I know a lot of them she can't tell, but we had so much fun. I can't even tell you. So, definitely Sharon.
And the very last question for you, Mount Rushmore, who is the 4 bands or musicians, just for yourself, whether it be songwriting, whether it be performance, whether it be the overall package, who are the 4 for yourself that you just love, that they're top of your pile?
So Hendrix.
Yep.
Jeff Tate from Queensryche. Oh, God. Mike Inez, because we've got to have a bass player in there and he's an absolute killer dude.
Yep.
And Joey Jordison, because he's one of the best live drummers I've ever seen in my life. And I watched him night after night. That drum kit rotating, solid as can be, and just a lovely, lovely man who I greatly, greatly miss. So I think that'd be a pretty good Mount Rushmore.
I think so. Sarah, thank you so much for coming on and talking. It's been a pleasure to speak to you, for you to answer all my questions about your career, about the future, about all your favourite artists. I could probably sit and talk to you for another 4 or 5 hours and still not get all my questions done, but we've got to cut it off somewhere. But maybe we'll do a part 2 at some point down the line.
Oh, yeah, because we haven't done the second part of my career, so we definitely need to do that. And plus, Groupie's Guide to the World. I mean, who's not going to want to hear about that book?
There you go. But until next time, Sarah, thank you so much for coming on. It's been a pleasure speaking to you, and I wish you all the luck in the future as well.
Thank you so much, Ian. You completely rock. Thank you.
Cheers, pal. Thank you.